What's up, party people of the SFL? Good evening, and welcome to episode 4 of Axis Live. I am your host, Dave Axis, and we have a great show for you here tonight. We have a half a dozen, count them, 6. We had more, but with the late start time, we had say goodbye to a couple of them, like Slyn Shady, who lives in England and can't come on until 2-3 o'clock in the morning, etc. But we still have 6 great GMs on our panel to break down the Season 15 SFL Draft. Before we get to them, though, a few things. Number one, as always, I want to thank Geralt Winkler. And so here's the thing. Geralt, I've been calling him Geralt. His name apparently is Geralt, but his last name is Winkler. So I just call him Fonzie from now on. So from now on, when I say thank you to Fonzie, Fonzie's helping produce my show. And if you have questions at Fonzie, that's who I'm talking about, just so you know for the future. Also, I don't want to forget my sponsors, Bad Boy Custom Rods, Trick Apparel, and then for the time being, Armadillo Ale Works. Again, not a sponsor, but definitely hooked up Lone Star with that free beer for the draft, which was amazing, by the way. So if you get the opportunity, please check them out if you live in the Texas or the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Otherwise, you can catch them at armadilloaleworks.com. Couple quick other things I want to get to. If you have questions for our panel tonight, please put them in the chat. Go ahead and at Geralt Fonzie. And I want to get some more interaction. You guys are like hit and miss on the shows. Sometimes you guys have a bunch of questions. Sometimes you don't seem to be now. So I want you guys to be more involved in the show. The last thing is, and I don't know if it's changed, but before I went on air, I saw that we have 92 followers. So if you haven't followed the show, please follow the show. I would love to get to 100 followers. It'll help me get some extra things on Twitch to help me make the show better for you. No, Art Vandalay, I am not drunk. I don't drink on Tuesdays and Thursdays until after the show because stupid questions like yours usually make me drink. Anyway, that being said, I don't know how the Florida-Arizona game ended, but if you guys know, throw the score up for me. I watched it almost to the very end, but I couldn't get the rest of it. Let's see if anybody says muted. Who muted me? You don't mute me. I don't know what that is. Oh, it froze on the last play? Oh, that's terrible. All right. That's okay. That stream was having some problems, so it's okay. I actually think Art Vandalay is drunk. All right, so finally moving on. Let's introduce our panel really quick. Like I said, we have 6 GMs. We have Chad Rowland from Baltimore. We have Doyle from Florida. We have and I've already been practicing this name all day. We have Jeff Melanishan. See, Jeff, I knew I was going to mess it up. Melanishan. There you go, Melanishan. From Louisiana, we've got Nelson Lozano from Portland, Robert Garrett Jr. from Fort Worth, and Tanner Hendricks from London. Like I said, we had 3 more lined up. We were going to have 9, but people just couldn't stay up so late. Oh, Ashley Jackson, Arizona 31-27. All right, congrats, Scorpions, and I'm sure Florida. I'm sure you guys played a good game. All right, first of all, panel, go ahead and unmute yourselves real quick, and let's just say hi. Chad, how you doing, bro?
Good, man. By yourself?
I'm hanging in there. Doyle?
I'm good.
Jeff?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
Nelson?
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Good. Robert?
Hey, everybody.
And Tanner?
Doing good.
And of course, we have Gunny, who will give us his pearls of wisdom later. Gunny, how you doing tonight, bro?
Hoorah!
Atta boy. Okay, so first and foremost, and I'm just going to start at the top and I'm going to go through. The first question that I want to ask each of you for the listeners, I would like to get an overall feel and thought from each of you for this season's draft format. I know it was different from every other season. With that 3rd round, 2nd round thing, and also with the supplemental. So starting with Chad, give me an overall view or feel on how you felt about this season's draft format, the format specifically.
For me, it wasn't that bad just because I had 1 pick in the first 4 rounds, and then I had 3 supplementals. So not too bad at all for me. I mean, for everybody else, I could see maybe a little frustration just because of the second and third pick swaps and all that. But on my end, I was fine with everything.
Okay, Doyle, what was your feeling of the draft format this season?
I thought it was like similar to everything else, just a little bit different. But like, definitely, if we talk about this in the later part, the one thing I didn't necessarily like was the fact that the supplemental draft, like that order, was only based off of how much cap you have. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we will. Actually, we're going to bring that up later. Who's next? Jeff, what did you think about the format this year?
Oh, format was it was nice. I really enjoyed it. I think out of all the positions that we had to fill, we got everybody that was on the top of our draft board. So I mean that's always a positive. But I think the format is great, and it's only going to expand as the seasons keep going.
Okay, good. Nelson, how about you?
Yeah. I think the format was cool. It took some time to kind of get used to all what the rules were and what was what. But once everything started flowing, it wasn't too bad at all. I agree with Doyle. I think once it got into the supplementary rounds, it's where it got a little bit different. But
Right.
we'll talk about that afterwards. But that's the only thing that I had about the whole draft.
Okay. Robert, what about you?
You know, I really liked how the format of the first 4 rounds was. I think as a whole for the Fort Worth front office, we didn't like the way the supplemental was, but otherwise the format of the draft was pretty good.
Okay, and then last but not least, Tanner.
I feel the first 4 rounds are pretty good, pretty great. We benefited greatly from the way the supplemental played out, but I think for a league as a whole, it could have been done differently and done a better way.
Okay, and we're going to dissect that a little bit too. I'm going to start with Doyle on this one. Did you specifically see any advantages or disadvantages for certain teams with this draft format?
So it's talking about the first 4 or the supplemental?
I'm talking about the whole thing.
So, like, the first 4, I don't really think there was an advantage. I think it was very similar to, like, the NFL draft or, like, any other draft. But the supplemental, where you have, like, Vancouver, for instance, had, like, 0.98 cap remaining, yet that led them to having, like, the 15th pick, I think, or 16th pick in the supplemental. And that was just, like, that was kind of weird. I thought they should have added it in, like, record to that instead of just being only if it was tied, record mattered. But that's just me.
Okay. Let's see. Jeff, what about you?
All right. Well, I think as a whole, it was pretty good. The only thing was, I know there was something going on, and with the owners, they were going over a potential rule change where after the second round, you'd be able to take anybody at a secondary position.
Right.
So that one, I think kind of screwed everything up, because that would have made plans a lot easier for teams where you could just do what you wanted after that second pick. But the fact that they voted against it, obviously we saw what happened. So I mean, no matter what, the teams had to adjust to that, especially a day before the draft. So I definitely think if they're going to, I know they always have to do a vote on things. If they're going to make some rule changes like that in the future, it's got to be at least if you're going to do it that close to the draft, you had like at least do it where like 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out or even a month out. I mean, for me, I would love it if they could vote on certain rules for the draft for the upcoming draft and have it, 2 months, 3 months out, so at least teams can prepare. But if worse comes to worse, I mean that would have been a good rule change. But outside of that, supplemental, I mean, yeah, we could talk till we're blue in the face about it, about how it could be a lot better, I should say. But I mean, what are you going to do? But
Right.
Yeah, as a whole, everything I think worked out pretty good. It's just that rule change I think would have been a lot better for rookies.
Okay, so following up on that, Nelson, same question to you, but let me piggyback on what Jeff was saying. I think that rule got changed late because there was a lot of complaining by teams and ownerships about the rule. So that's why they changed it the last second. Do you think the league did the right thing by changing the rule at the last second, which I believe was a better rule personally? Or do you think they should have left it alone because it was so late in the game?
I think honestly, with more time, just like Jeff said, it would have definitely helped us better with understanding. I felt like we were trying to understand something a day before we actually had to get into the draft, which can be a little difficult, especially if you have a game plan. Sometimes that changes your game plan, so you're able to try to take advantage of it as much as you can. But yeah, I think more notice would have been a little bit better. I'm glad that they're listening, and that's great that the league is doing so.
Right.
But again, it's either you listen and then we have to all make that sacrifice to learn it, or they stick with it and now we're sticking with something we might not be happy with.
Right. Okay. Robert, what do you think about that?
It should have been changed, honestly, a long time before. It was the right move to change that rule. I agree with Jeff, though. They should have done it sooner. But I mean, especially on our part, we had already kind of had a plan of what we were going to do with that first secondary pick, so it worked out anyway. But being able to really sit down and talk about it would have been nice.
Right. Tanner, and, kind of piggybacking on what Robert just said, and that's kind of the role of a GM, right, is to have that plan B, plan C, plan D to compensate for these last-second changes, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I had 5-6 plans going into each night, readjusted the plans based on what happened the night before, and had to readjust those plans after the rule had changed. I agree with the room that the rule should have been changed sooner than it was. But as a GM and anybody in a front opposition in the league, you got to be ready to make changes on the fly. That's what the SFL is about, is making changes as soon as possible.
Right. Okay. And Chad, you've got the last word on this topic.
I actually was just going to say the exact same thing Tanner said. You always got to have not just A, B, and C, but you got to have D, E, and F and all the way through Z plans. So you have to be always prepared for that as an SFL GM.
Right. Okay. So let me ask you guys this question then. We're talking about the supplemental got brought up in that last question, but my understanding, and I might be wrong, and I'm not sure I necessarily was against it, especially being a new team, obviously, because I think the supplemental draft was meant to help mostly the newer teams. My understanding is in the past they've had expansion drafts. If you were here for any of those, I'd like to get your take on how you feel about the expansion draft versus the supplemental draft. And if you haven't been here, then give me your feedback on the idea of an expansion draft versus supplemental draft. And I'm going to start with Jeff.
All right. Man, I can't remember that far back. So I don't even know if I was here for that. No, because I think I came in when I think New Orleans and Las Vegas started. So I was like just new to the league. So we haven't had an expansion draft until, I mean, obviously the two teams that came in this season. But we didn't do that. We had a supplemental. So I mean, I know they want to help the expansion teams. I get that, but the fact that St. Louis was able to have all of that cap room and then on top of that have the first pick in the supplemental, I definitely think there has to be at least move the. You could do it based on I don't even think they should. If we're gonna have 7 rounds, then make it 7 rounds. Don't make something a supplemental round. Just say after round 4, you could take anybody at any position. That way, the draft stays the same. You have the fluidity of the draft throughout the whole process, and every team knows going in, hey, we might have this pick. But then when teams start filling up, all right, now we're moving up a little bit here, and in this round, later rounds, and whatnot. So. That's how I think they should do it, and that's just my 2 cents on it.
Okay, Nelson, what do you have to add to that?
I think, again, for the aspect of the supplemental side, because I wasn't here for expansion either, so for it to be a draft that I'm guessing that's more specific towards the expansion teams to go and pick from. I mean, that's cool. Felt like a benefit towards us for the newer teams for us to be able to get some people because we weren't as, I don't want to even say desirable, right? But just as known as some of the other organizations that's been out for a while.
Right.
So I feel like it gave us the opportunity to fill in those needs as we needed going into those rounds. I just think from the players' standpoint, right? So the players we brought in, I think that understanding is a little bit shaded to them in a sense because they see, okay, cool. Like an example for us, we took Bernard Patterson number 2, but then they looked at other teams who took a DT and the supplemental who had more cap space that was able to throw a person who never played more cap. So to me, I have no problem with the overall. I just think, again, it's how the players see it. And I know that caused some frustrations amongst general chat, amongst other areas as well, that I just think that understanding is what might have fallen off when the whole supplemental thing happened.
Right. Okay. Robert, were you here for any previous expansion drafts?
I was not. I've heard a little bit about them, but I wasn't personally here for them.
What's your take on that?
It gets into that kind of fuzzy spot, just like trades, where teams have to protect some guys, and there might be other players that don't want to leave the team they're on, but because they're in that expansion draft pool, they now have to kind of cross their fingers and hope they don't end up there.
Right.
But I also see the benefit of it because teams like us or Portland, and even to a point, you guys in Lone Star and Louisiana, we're kind of at times. I know most of us got the free agents we wanted,
right,
but kind of struggled to fill out the locker room before, and it ended up where we had a ton of picks.
So, okay, well, actually, let me move on to Tanner, and then I'll put my 2 cents in there. Tanner, you seem like you've been around a while. Were you here for the last expansion draft?
I actually wasn't. Contrary to most people's belief, this is actually just starting my second year in the league.
Yeah, why does it seem like you've been here forever?
I've got to know a lot of people.
Okay, so what's your take on this then? Expansion draft versus supplemental. Go ahead.
I'll start with the expansion. I mean, I think if you did a 3-round expansion draft for new teams or expansion teams, and allowing teams to protect 5 to 10 players on their roster, and then the rest be a pool to be drafted from, would be an interesting idea. Mm-hmm. It's very similar to what actual pro teams, NFL teams, Major League Soccer teams do in expansion draft situations. I think it'd be interesting to explore potentially in the future. Maybe season 16 of 2 more teams coming in. And then supplemental, I think if we're going to do a supplemental, you should have had the expansion teams first, the expansion and new rosters first, and then do the cap situation. I'm going to be honest. I think it gave an unfair advantage to us and a team like St. Louis, who struggled filling out our roster before the draft, and so we had a ton of leftover cap that went to some guys that realistically, I wish I would have we were able to give cap to some other players.
Right.
And it just created a weird situation in the league that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And I personally would prefer an expansion over a supplemental going forward.
Okay. Chad, how about you? I think you seem like you've been here forever too. Were you here for an expansion draft previously?
No, I just wear on people like that.
Yeah, that's no joke.
But no, I mean, actually, Tanner said was exactly what I was going to go on was, having a 3-round, expansion draft, sort of like what the NBA does. They protect, I think, a certain amount of players too. Then you get a pool of players doing that. That would have been neat to see that way as well.
Okay. Doyle, I haven't gotten to you on this question, right? Doyle?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
So, my thing with expansion drafts and sports in general, I think it's usually not the best idea, but it's the most efficient idea. Because if you don't have an expansion draft, you're going to give the team that is an expansion team a lot more picks than any other team just to fill out their roster. And even though it might not help, or it might not be like good for some of the players that go from a team they really like to a new team that they don't know if they like or not, I think there's going to be enough players that are like in interviews and stuff that are like, hey, I'll join y'all, that actually like care and stuff and will be willing to at least stay one season there. But I think with the expansion teams, usually when we have expansion teams, we also have like new teams like Lone Star and Louisiana. But if those teams don't retain enough players, we should have, like, just consider them expansion teams at that point. Like, if you don't retain more than like 5 players as after you buy a team, then you're essentially an expansion team. Like, I would like that to happen in the future, because even in like S11, when Baltimore, Las Vegas, and New Orleans came in, Denver was a new team. Granted, they retained most of their players, but they were picking like 8th, I think, that draft. But it's just like it's a disadvantage that you would rather just give like the advantage there.
Okay.
If,
Yeah, no, go ahead and finish.
If that made sense.
Yeah. No, it did. And actually, everybody, I love all the feedback that everybody, I love most of the opinions are pretty similar, but you have little different takes on them. There's a question from somebody in the chat. I couldn't see who it was. But they want to know if there's been any issues in locker rooms with the supplemental picks possibly getting higher contracts, thus starting over early round picks with the supplemental rules in place this year. Right. So I'm guessing what the question is too, that supplemental can affect depth charts as well, right? So if you're a wide receiver 1 on your team, and then all of a sudden they get a wide receiver in the supplemental and he has a higher value than you, that could cause a rift in the locker room. So starting with Nelson, has there been any locker room issues with supplemental players having higher value than your other draft picks or your veteran players?
No. Again, in our own locker room, no. There just has been discussions about other players that might have gotten different contracts that are in different teams, and they just wanted clarification. And to them, they see it as a lot of them, the way they saw it was, if you played in that primary position, we picked you in that primary position. They didn't see it that if somebody who came in as a supplemental for whatever got a bigger contract than that person who played in the minors that whole time and was picked in that primary position. I think that's where, like I told you, that player perspective is a little bit different. I haven't had it in our locker room. They just been asking and kind of chatting amongst themselves, but nothing that's really saying, hey, you got a bigger contract than me. That's not fair. And our situation is a little bit different just because, again, we had so many picks. So we had so many picks in the first 4 rounds, and then when we got into the supplemental, they weren't that off from each other. So we didn't have that problem in Portland.
Okay. Robert, before I get to you with this question, I just riz a bit, and I feel like I know who that is, but I can't put my mind on it.
That's Adam Wiseman.
Okay, Adam. So sure. Adam put in the chat, also, it's a players' league in regard to transaction. An expansion draft turns it into an owners' league and will lose players due to not wanting to play an expansion team. So next week, just a little heads up, a little teaser for next week. Next Tuesday and Thursday is Owners Week on Access Live. On Tuesday, I'm going to have all the new team owners on, and then on Thursday, I'm going to have a bunch of veteran team owners on. And I think what I would love to hear from them is how these so-called expansion drafts went down before and how they differ from the NFL. Because I agree with Adam that if you can't, a typical expansion draft would be picking players from other teams, but I have a feeling the SFL did it differently back in the day, if I'm hearing correctly that they actually did it. Robert, go ahead with your take on, or I'm sorry, let us know, have you seen or heard of any issues either in your locker room or other locker rooms, general chat, what have you, on supplemental players having higher value?
I haven't personally seen it in our locker room. Obviously, where we were at with cap and we did a couple pay cuts to a couple guys. We had to sign guys at base copper in the supplemental draft. But I think personally, if there are locker room issues with that, that's really a team and an owner's issue. And it kind of shows the people that they drafted, the attitude problems. Every guy we brought in is just happy to be on a team, ready to play, like wanting to learn everything like that. So if there are issues, it's more of a character issue than anything, and that's how I feel about it.
Okay, and Robert, while I have you on here, there was a question in the chat, and I'm not sure. It says, how did the league compensate the Toros for that one supplemental pick? I'm not actually even sure what he's talking about. Do you know what he's talking about?
Yeah, that was actually for Houston. It was Houston drafted a guy at offensive line.
Oh, that's with it. The thing with Atlanta.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Does anybody on the panel know how that worked out?
I know a little bit about it, but not a whole lot.
You just want to tell what you know, and then maybe there's people in the audience that can chime in.
Yeah, from what I understood, Houston drafted the guy at offensive line. I don't remember his name, but
Leo Jefferson.
Yeah, they drafted him. They had never said a word to him. Somebody just said, "Hey, he's willing to play offensive line." And meanwhile, he's talking to Atlanta. Just getting ready to get drafted by them and everything. And so all of a sudden, his name's up on the screen, and he's like, "What the hell?" Like that this was not what was supposed to happen. And so I guess they had worked it out that Atlanta drafted the guy Houston was going to take, and then they just swapped players afterwards, is my understanding of it all.
So do we know if that player that got swapped to Houston wanted to play the position that was given to him on Houston?
No, he didn't want to play offensive lineman because he had reached out to me and just explained that he didn't want to play that. There was just a miscommunication amongst what was going on there, and that they were going to rectify it. But I know that he didn't want to play offensive lineman at all.
Okay. I'm jotting this down right now for an owner question for next week, so maybe we can get down to the bottom of that one as well. Where'd I leave off? Tanner, any issues in your locker room with supplementals? And this is actually a great time to ask you this other question. This will be a two-part question for Tanner only. First of all, has there been any locker room issues due to this? And secondly, I'm specifically talking about Zach the Burner Turner, who I believe was I can't remember if he was your very last 8th round or 7th round or 6th round or whatever it was pick. But I think I saw he is quite possibly one of the most highly rated defensive tackles in all of the SFL. So maybe you can speak to that as well and kind of give me a two-part answer.
Yeah, so I'll start with the locker room issues. We're not having any currently due to this whole supplemental thing. Actually, our 3rd overall pick is going to end up being our 2nd tight end on the depth chart, just the way the supplemental draft played out.
Right.
And we had the discussion with Benji, and again, Benji's a team first guy, and it's the reason I took him 3rd overall. At the end of the day, Benji wants what's best for the team, and he's going to be an asset all the way around us for the team. So our 8th or 7th round pick, Dayton Rhodes, is actually coming in 13 value higher than Benji is, and he's okay with that. Both guys are good guys, okay with that. Got a good situation there. And then, we have Zach Turner, who is one of the highest defensive tackles in the league currently, and we just drafted him. The interesting thing, it's again the way the supplemental draft played out. We can talk later about the burner if we want, but it's an interesting thing, and I know it's causing a lot of discussion around the league.
Mm-hmm.
And me myself agree that supplemental guys shouldn't have been able to have been brought in at that high. It was a loophole or an exploit in the system,
right.
And as a GM, we're going to exploit it.
Right, and I think when Andy Hamilton was on the show, or whatever it was, a couple weeks ago, him and I had a little difference of opinion with like the way us in St. Louis drafted a running back. And I'm not faulting, you guys or your owners or your teams at all with taking advantage of the rules that are in play at the time. You play the hand that you're dealt, and that's just the way it is. I just think that it's good to have this discussion going forward. I know the league's already talked about changing the draft process next season, the format. So hopefully this will just help that. Chad, what about you, bro? Any issues in your locker room?
Not in mine. None at all, actually. So we're pretty good on that part.
Yeah. Have you heard anything else? have you seen anything else?
I mean,
in Gen Chat or
I've seen some stuff in Gen Chat, and I've had I've had a player or two reach out and be like, "Hey, why am I higher rated than this guy?" And who was picked 2nd or 3rd overall. But mean, it's the rule that was in place, and the teams that were able to take advantage of it took advantage of it. So, no fault to them. They were just doing what was best for their franchise. So obviously the SFL will probably, change that for next season. Obviously, it doesn't do that.
Right. Okay. Who's Doyle? What about you? What about your locker room?
So honestly, I kind of knew that our first 2 picks were going to be like knocks out of the park. Not sure if they're going to say, but for the season at least. But our last 3 picks were also really, really good. I honestly think we had a really, really good draft, but we had no cap remaining, so we really didn't have like any issue with that. Now, what I will say to 2 of the situations, just very briefly, Leo Jefferson, right? How he just got picked out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
I literally got picked out of the blue when I got drafted, but I was like, okay, I guess. but, and then with the supplemental draft, I honestly think it's not necessarily like, oh, this was like kind of like rigged, where if you just had cap that you could use it. I'm not really sure it's that, more than the fact that it's the SFLM players right now.
Uh-huh.
If you have a specific position you want and you have a specific value target for that, it's going to be a lot harder to hit that with a SFLM player than it would be hit it with like a new build or even a secondary build sometimes.
Right. Okay. Jeff, did I start this question with you, or have I gotten to you yet?
No, you haven't gotten
Okay,
me
go
yet.
ahead.
Repeat it one more time.
Yeah. So with the whole supplemental players having some more value than the other drafts, the rookies drafted in the first through 4th rounds, plus, maybe being higher than some veterans. Has there been any issues in your locker room at all?
No, there's been absolutely no issues in the locker room. Everybody is excited. They are pumped up about the season, and we're ready to get this one rolling. There hasn't been any issues like that, as I'm alluding to. Everybody came in. I mean, we've been pretty upfront as a front office with when we brought in Ross Napoli as assistant GM and everything. So we're getting everything rolling. Gerald's a great owner, one of the best I think in the league, and there's been no issues to speak of. I haven't seen anything. I try to stay out of general chat for the most part, so I mean I'm only focusing on Louisiana, and that's the only thing I have to focus on.
Okay, good. All right, and like I said, I don't expect you necessarily to air any of your dirty laundry anyway, from your locker room on air anyway. But the fact that it is in Gen Chat quite a bit, and we've seen a couple people go at it over it. Was a question that needed to be asked. So getting back to, let's see here. No more questions right now from the chat. So I don't know if you guys remember. When I started off, I think it was the first show, I did a little segment called "What Does the Fox Say?" And then Fox hasn't been able to be around lately with some other stuff. So before we get to Gunny's question, Fox has a question for you GMs, and I'm just going to go in order. And after he finishes asking it, Robert, if you want to start first, and then we'll go around. So Fox, are you ready to rock and roll?
I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good to go.
How's it going, everyone? Good. Okay, so
Oh no,
they're all muted, bro. That's why.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, so in the last week of the SFL minor league season, I got tackled for not 1 but 2 safeties. Both of those were made possible by the punter's ability to give us really bad field position. How surprised were you guys that no punters were drafted despite their unsung ability to swing momentum in their favor?
I will start with Robert.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that more punters didn't go off the board. You've also seen a lot of great play by Marcus Agrippa for Florida. The only contract punter, I believe, in the league at the moment. So I'm kind of shocked, but a lot of teams were looking for those smaller spots, wide receiver 3 and 4, extra corners for the nickel and dime packages, things like that. And, when you get players built up in those spots, I feel that it could be more of an importance than a punter.
Okay. Tanner, what about you?
I think, of course, special teams plays a big role in any football league, team, whatever it have to be. But I think leagues like the NFL and real life football value the punter more than what we do.
Right.
Just the nature of the simulation. And so I wasn't really surprised that we didn't see any punters go. I just know a lot of owners and a lot of GMs, a lot of front offices just don't value the punter currently. And as roster sizes increase, then they'll be valued more.
Okay. Chad, what about you, bro?
Yeah, I think with the supplemental coming in and having the opportunity to be able to get offensive linemen, I think that took away some opportunities for maybe a punter to get drafted. I'm surprised that it didn't happen, but not surprised it didn't happen at the same time.
Okay. Doyle?
If our offense was more consistent last season, I think Agrippa would have gotten a lot more favor going towards him. But I honestly think with punters in the NFL and the SFL, the thing is that your really good punters are going to go under the radar. And then when you want to get that really good punter, you usually don't have one. So I think eventually, yes, you will see punters in like the SFL. But I think that the main thing owners see about it is they think of it as like wasted cap or inefficient cap or stuff like that.
Right.
And I remember 2.5 seasons ago, I guess, maybe 1.5 seasons ago, I don't know, Destro was showing the owners in a stream how a kicker punter combo player would work. Not sure if that's still on the table, but at that time that was actually like in the like being voted on in owners meetings. But I don't think until further into like our lifetime as a league that we'll see more punters than just Marcus Agrippa being the best punter to ever live.
Right.
But
Jeff, before I get to you on this question, Adam threw in there too again. There weren't the punters available, plus supplemental punters are questionable for very important value reasons. Obviously, yeah, I don't think any punter should have been taken in the supplemental unless you really, wanted to have a really kick-ass punter who would help you with field advantage. But I have a feeling there had to be some punters, right, available. You guys had punters in the minor league, and I'm sure some people had to do punter as a secondary position. So, Jeff, where do you stand on all that?
Well, I came over from Florida after spending 3 seasons in London, so that was a great opportunity for me to learn from just a different owner and front office on how they do things. I actually spoke with Gerald this offseason about possibly going for a punter because I saw how important it was in Florida. The amount of times that we were able to pin teams inside the 20-yard line was incredible, especially for the defense for Florida as well that last season. So I know how important it is. It's just getting these. I mean, the owners are starting to work their way over to offensive line now after Andy's been talking about it for the last couple seasons. I mean, you're seeing Queen City. They're going to roll out 4 offensive linemen this season, which is going to be the first time in SFL history that's going to happen. Most of the time, it was 2 last season with Vancouver. Most teams have 2 now. Some have 1, but I mean, the fact that Mighty was willing to take a risk on Agrippa last season and draft him as a punter. But it's gonna take a roster expansion again for owners to start thinking about drafting a punter because, like Doyle said, some of them think that it's wasted cap because they're not scoring points. They're just changing and flipping field position, so they're not kicking a ball through the upright. Like an offensive lineman is blocking to put 6 points up on the board for the running teams, and for holding for the place kicker and all that. So I mean, it's going to take at least another roster expansion, depending on the roster expansion, because I know some teams don't have a third corner, so some are going to be looking at drafting that third corner or drafting another strong safety or something like that. So it's going to take at least until they open up another maybe 2 or 3 roster spots for owners to start thinking about drafting a punter.
Right. Wow. Okay.
Plus it's going to be. I mean, the player has to be all right with playing the punter position. like Agrippa, he's perfectly okay with it. So it just takes the mindset as well. And we're starting to see that with offensive linemen. There are like the two players we drafted for Louisiana that are playing offensive line. They are really excited about playing offensive line for our team, Leonard Butler Sr. and Rudy Ray Dunn. So, I mean, they just have to be excited about playing the position. And once you have that, then it's all she wrote, and they will stay there and play there for however long.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you think, real quick, Jeff, before I move on to Nelson, because I think Nelson's the last word on this, what's more glamorous, kickers or punters? Kickers?
Kickers for now, because they're putting points up on the board. But I mean, don't be surprised if punter does get more glamorous, especially if you get somebody that starts talking a lot, is active in chat. Like if Agrippa, he's on the staff side, but if you had like a player who's active doing stats and whatnot, and they're like talking up their player a lot, like not as much as a Johnny Pickler for the quarterback position, but if you had the perfect way the perfect player would be like a Marquette King when he was in Oakland. You have somebody who's out there and talking a lot, then it will make the punter position that much more glamorous.
Right. Okay. Nelson, what's your 2 cents, bro?
I think, again, with how teams were drafting and what they were really prepping for, it makes more sense around the offensive lineman if you want to give your people the enough time, on the offensive side to actually throw the ball. I think a lot of teams focused on that line on the defense side a lot more, and it makes sense with the offensive linemen. I think with punting, with the punters themselves, like they said before, there is an advantage to it, but when you have such limited positions that you can have on your team, you just start picking and choosing what could, in your best way, is what's going to be the best for your team. And I think until there's just like everybody said, until there's a roster expansion where people can actually choose these positions and be comfortable in them, I think that's when you're going to start seeing that be a change in people's mindset. Because again, I'm pretty sure people would have loved to play offensive lineman if there was more of that available. I felt like later on, when people were more like, hey, I'm willing to play whatever, that's when people really considered doing offensive lineman. But there was few that said, hey, I want to go into the league as an offensive lineman. I think when we have more of that position growth, then we'll see that come off the board.
Yeah, and to your point, Jeff Berg, Jeff, Jeff, I forget your title now, but director of telling us what to do for putting our shows on the Discord. He said that activity and off the field got Jess drafted at kicker in the first round. If there was an amazing person set in punter, someone would probably take him, and I agree, especially with the example you guys just gave. Okay, Gunny, I don't know if you're going to be ready, bro. You guys remember, we always have, every show, Gunny's Pearls of Wisdom. And, like I've said a million times, Gunny is always on the ball. And you got to watch out, because sometimes he'll have information for you that you don't even know he's got, and you're not even ready for it, and he's ahead of you. So, Gunny, Pearls of Wisdom, go ahead.
Hey, good evening, SFL community. First of all, thanks to these GMs for sharing knowledge and insight tonight on the Dave Access Show. Don't forget to sign up for the SFL Season 15 Survivor Pool. Reach out to Kramer Jackman or Johnny Pickler for details. The SFL season starts Friday night, July 17th, Baltimore versus Atlanta. Gunny supports the team charity contribution initiative organized by Ross Napoli. I'm on board with the Lone Star contribution with the team, and also on a personal level, I will be donating to the Alzheimer organization in memory of my player name, which is my dad. That is all.
Awesome, Gunny. That was perfect. The timing and everything, man. You got this down. I think Gunny's going to have his own show pretty soon. I might have to step aside here. Speaking of that initiative real quick, that Ross and Johnny talked about on Coach's Corner, I believe it was yesterday or the day before. I'm actually going to have them on the 14th. So that Tuesday before the season starts, they're going to come on and talk about the progress. They're going to talk about the platform. they're going to talk about the different charities and all that, so we can kind of all. If you guys want to listen to that and kind of get on board with it, that would be amazing. Let's see. Getting back to, I'm going to start with Tanner on this one. So Tanner, different philosophies for the draft. You've got Baltimore. Let me just run this down. Actually, I did some digging today. And it's not. I mean, not a lot of digging, but Chad, Baltimore only needed 4 picks in the draft. Florida only needed 5. Louisiana needed 8, and London needed 8. Then you get into teams like Fort Worth and Portland, newer teams, obviously, that needed 11 and 13. So I want to know from each of you. Some of you had less draft picks to pick, and some of you had more draft picks to pick. Give me the overall draft philosophy, Tanner, for London. As you're going in, are you thinking, did you have your eye on the supplemental? Did you think you were going to do some trades to try to pick up some more? You guys were already, I think, the 3rd or 4th pick to begin with. Were you trying to move up to get extra picks in the first round? What was your overall philosophy for the season 15 draft with all the craziness it brought?
So originally, our whole mindset was going to be trading back. We had the 3rd overall pick. It was going to be trading back and picking up some extra value later in the first or second round. Then the trade market quickly dried up. Some changes happened, and then we know Liam no longer wanted to trade. So we were fine with that. We kind of stood where we were every single pick. Our whole goal was we had a lot of cap, and so we weren't worried about getting guys with lots of weeks banked. We were more worried about getting personality. So guys like Benji and Jeff went first with, I believe, only 11 weeks banked for us. And these guys can contribute more than just as players. These guys are going to be cornerstones of a franchise, cornerstones of an organization, cornerstones of the league. And so we went out and grabbed these guys early. We had great interviews with them. And as we progressed through the draft, first 4 rounds at least, it was always about getting who we believed was some of the best personalities in the league. I had went through after my interviews of everybody and had 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that I loved, and we got 4 of those guys in the first 4 rounds. So I wasn't upset with that in any means. Guys that I loved, we got, no questions asked. Then when we got to supplemental rounds, it was more just, again, getting guys that we liked, personalities, barring one pick, in my personal opinion. Our first pick in the supplemental was Eric Surrett. Wants to coach. That's always a great thing. Has the game, has the software. It's always great. So we had a good conversation of him before the supplemental. Me and Liam actually differed on our 7th round pick, or 6th round pick there. I was wanting to go in a different direction. Liam stepped in and picked who he wanted to pick in Zach. And then Dayton Rhodes and me actually go back a couple years. I knew Dayton from a former sim league. I believe Jeff's in that league is in that league also. So Dayton was just kind of reconnecting that former connection that we had. And for the basic part, I mean, I got 6 out of 10 guys that I loved starting this draft, starting the process.
So and you know what, I don't mind. It's good that you're okay to say, hey, you and Liam had a difference of opinion, and at the end of the day, Liam went the way he wanted to go. I think Charles and I saw eye to eye on almost everything too, but we had 1 or 2 things that we didn't see eye to eye on, and at the end of the day, he's the owner, and I'm the GM, and that's just the way it goes. Chad, what about you, bro? You guys only needed 4 picks, which is the least on this whole panel. You obviously came at it from an entire different philosophy.
Yeah, so for us, at the end of the season, we really had to evaluate where the needs were. We didn't have very many, obviously, because we were able to retain a lot, and free agency really helped us as well. With the losses of, our pretty much our entire secondary, except for Giovanni Bolt, we knew we had to hit the secondary. So obviously, going back to free agency a little bit, getting Chris Dodd and getting Troy Loshaw really helped us out tremendously. So we knew what we wanted to come into the draft was to be able to get that nickel corner, and that was our main philosophy in the first round. We had a couple of guys that were really high on the board. I had a 1A and a 1B option, and Ben Stacking Paper was the one we chose. He was a great pick. We were really excited to have him in our locker room. Then we really just kind of kicked back and just waited for the supplemental, waited to see what happened. I did over 75, I think, interviews, 75 to 80 interviews.
Wow.
So, even just for 4 picks. So you have to do your due diligence. Once we got to the supplemental, then it really was about the positions we needed. So, we talked about getting another linebacker. We talked about getting another tight end. Talked about getting, a defensive tackle. So it kind of depended on which place fell in. We didn't have a set order. But that was the good thing about with TJ is he really trusts me on the picks. He just kind of lets me do my thing. And, we were able to get every guy that we wanted. So we were very happy with the draft that we had.
Okay, awesome. Doyle, you guys are kind of in the same boat as Baltimore. You only needed 5 picks. So was your overall philosophy similar to Baltimore's?
Yeah, for the most part. For the first 2 picks were because we knew we wanted 2 linebackers in the first 2 rounds.
Right.
And we had a board of 7 people with Eric Hammer as like the number 1 option by not necessarily like a country mile, but like a good distance. But but the thing was going up to the draft because I know Eric from other leagues as well, and my main thing was I wanted to draft him, but I was also like I didn't want to hype him up in general chat so like other people would catch on.
Right.
So, but then I saw the mocks coming in, and like the first mocks, he was like early second, late first. But in some of the other like the newer mocks, he was going like to us, and to some of those I was like, hey, this one's actually kind of accurate, but I didn't point anything out in that. But we finally got him, and our second pick went first overall, so we couldn't get him. But honestly, I did want to bring at least one Albuquerque guy, so Parrott falling to us, very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had like 2 days to like strategize on like who we were gonna pick, and we knew we were gonna go for personality. Like we need an offensive lineman, a cornerback, and a tight end. So we need personality and people who wanted to stay there. And I think we got all 3 of those, and it was like the same thing, like where first pick we Adam Jones, I think was 5th. I think he might have been 6th. I'm pretty sure 5th though. Adam Jones 5th. I'd already talked to him before. I was like, yes. Then we have Verdon Zarkov or Deontay Stoneville. I forget which order we picked them in, but both. Like I didn't really know anything about them before, but then I talked about them after we had drafted them. Mighty had done most of the interviews, but I'd actually talked to them after we drafted them. I'm like, they're really chill. We'll probably have them for a long time. It's cool. And I think that's going to be close to the mentality that we keep in the future, since that in past drafts, the Storm haven't even had to draft more than like 1 or 2 people to fill out a roster.
Right. Interesting. So, well, actually, hold on. Before I, who's next on this? Jeff. Hey, before I get to Jeff, Chad, Eagle Mondavi in the chat said, basically, you had 75 interviews, you never interviewed him, so you must hate him.
Oh, I didn't really have time for the 76th.
So we know where he was on your depth chart on your.
He knows the love I got for him, so he's fine.
So you were 76th on their draft board, Eagle. There you go, buddy.
Oh, there you go. Congratulations, Bub.
There you go.
No, I didn't think I'd even have a shot in hell in for Eagle. So that should tell you how highly I thought of him if I didn't even have a chance at him.
There you go. Jeff, you're kind of in between this group. We got Baltimore and Florida with like just only needing 4 and 5. You've got Fort Worth and Portland needing 11 and 13 draft picks. You're kind of in the middle where London was with 8. So how did you like share philosophies, or how did that work out?
It was pretty much me and Gerald running the show until, for the most part, up until we were able to get Johnny in there for a little bit to just help us out a little bit with like certain rookies and whatnot, who's he been talking to and whatnot. So, I mean, it was pretty much we pretty much were just going out. I mean, just messaging people. I would talk to I don't know how many rookies each and every day. I mean, it got pretty ridiculous there towards the end of the draft, and it was just, man, it's time to get this draft going because I mean, my DMs are like long scrolling through trying to find conversations that you had. Then you got guys still messaging you that's bumping it up. So it's like, all right, cool. Like it's like flavor of the day type stuff. Like what
Right.
flavor do you like today? But for the most part, as soon as we got to the nitty gritty, I guess, we knew who our first pick was after we had some conversations with Ross. It was kind of apparent what he's going to bring to our team, just what he would bring to the SFL as a whole, and the fact that he's on this. He's writing. He was on the beat here. He is on the beat team, doing some stuff for like the. He was doing something with some of the SFLM, writing out some things. But he's got the game, he's got the system, so it gives Gerald somebody to mentor under his wing a little bit. Then from Ross, we actually got a hold of Deontay Wilder. That's Ross Napoli Jr. That's Ross Napoli's son. So I reached out to most of these people first, or they reached out to me. I know Ross reached out to me first, and then we just had an established connection. Then I was like, yo, Gerald, like we need to probably talk to this guy, get him, 2-on-1 here. Let's get some interviews lined up. So we interviewed him, did some other things as well. Then after that, I mean, the second pick we knew probably it was going to be a receiver. We were actually waiting on the vote for the owners.
Right.
Yeah, if it would have went a certain way, we would have taken a different receiver there. But whatever happened to that, it's all she wrote. We actually got who we actually wanted anyway, because we had conversations with Mike going all the way up until like a couple hours before the draft. I reached out to him just as like a last interview the day before, actually, and he blew me away with his answers. And we kind of had to talk Gerald a little bit onto it because we had 3 different receivers. But then, I mean, we pretty much got everybody on our draft board that we felt really comfortable could bring something to this organization. Everybody that we brought in will contribute in more ways than just being a player.
Good. Yeah, and you know what? And we've discussed that on this show several times about the person and the player both. Let's see. Nelson. There you go. Go ahead.
So the way that we went about everything was one, we made sure everybody that we chose, everybody in the organization agreed to, from the OC, DC, our owner, everybody we've spoken to and we have a connection with. I interviewed over like 150 candidates myself, trying to get everybody in front of a coach saying, hey, we love this guy, and seeing how they fit in their scheme. Everything was a scheme pick, so depending on what our defense wanted to do, our defensive coach and what our offensive coach wanted to do, we selected players and how they worked in their scheme, how they simmed, how they interacted with the conversation, and were there people that were really going to be our foundational pieces building into the future, which we do. Like every single person we spoke to, we know about, we have a good relationship with. They created such a great atmosphere in the locker room, is what we wanted. Very engaged. So honestly, going into this, we got everybody for the most part that we wanted. There's a couple teams that took players that we were looking at, but not maybe in the same value as they were. But for the most part, we got every single person we wanted at the value that we felt was best. Right. And when we brought in the supplemental part with Derwin Nuevo and Robert, these are people that we've spoken to as well that we loved. We just had to figure out where we could add them in the scheme, and I think that's where it got into it. The first couple picks were people that we liked, that had value, that wanted to be here, and showed proof in the sims that they did very well. And then when we got the supplementals, where could we get these people that we really liked and maybe in a position that they weren't originally thinking of, but because they're great and they sim well and they contribute, we decided to draft them.
Yeah, that's good. Somebody in the chat just said, I missed the name, but they basically said that they loved their interview with you. Things just didn't work out. So, Robert,
Dave, real quick. I actually, Robert for Fort Worth, we actually worked out a trade. with them for the third pick, and that got us JoJo Shalizzi, who we didn't, based on the intel we had, we didn't think was actually going to be there, and we actually think that we got the steal based on him still being there in the third round. So I just wanted to say.
Well, you know what? We're actually coming up on an hour. I think we're right at an hour right now. I try to wrap it up around an hour, but I think I'm gonna let Robert answer this this question, and then I'm just gonna do a little speed round. I do want to know from each of you, who do you think the steal of the draft was, be it on your team or someone else's team. So Jeff, you can repeat that again, or you can give me something else too on that. Robert, draft philosophy for Fort Worth.
Yeah, our philosophy, we we all worked pretty hard between me, Nacho, and Hacker for the first 4 rounds. Just interviewing guys. We had a big list, a board that we could all look at and work together. And honestly, every guy that we wanted, and I know Dynasty's probably lurking in the chat, so I'll say besides Dynasty, because obviously we filled our quarterback needs, but every guy that we wanted, we ended up getting. And then when it came around to the supplemental draft, we had promoted Thrilliums to general manager, and I moved up to the vice president. They kind of just told us, like, look, guys, this is your show from here. We trust your judgment. So, Thrilliums and I worked together just to figure out those last few people, the puzzle pieces we needed. And I guess real quick to answer your next question, so you don't have to come back to me. I feel one of our steals of the draft was Cameron Curtis. We got him at base copper as a receiver, but brought him in. He's our director of communications now, working right alongside with us, make sure social media and everything's running. And I think that was a big acquisition for us.
Okay, awesome. And apparently Nacho and Hacker, put a lot of trust in you guys too, so that's great to hear. Tanner, who was the steal of the draft, either your team or another team?
Fox Highwind. No question about it.
Fox Highwind, which is on your team. Okay, Chad, what about you?
I was actually going to say Fox as well.
Okay. Doyle?
Honestly, I think there was so many steals in this draft, depending on what you mean by steal. Like, there's people that fell, the running backs and wide receivers who could get like a quality one in like the supplementary. Like there was a bunch of different like ways you could say a steal. Like, getting a quarterback at a different position in the supplementary, a steal. Getting a running back in the supplementary, steal. Like, just the list goes on.
So
what
does a steal mean to you?
Like, honestly, it's weird because like in most drafts or most like just sports in general, a steal is something you can either get for cheap or you get lucky on. And getting lucky and knowing it within like before the season even starts, I think would be a difficult thing.
Interesting. So Fox and Gunny, I'm going to come to you last, so be prepared to answer this question, but I'm going to Jeff next.
Steal of the draft. I'm gonna stick to it. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna stick with JoJo.
Oh, okay. That was easy. Nelson, steal of the draft.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I think on my side, I had a lot of steals in the draft. I think from Connor to Derek to getting Nuevo. Getting Shot Allen all the way that we did. I mean, there's a lot of steals that we've gotten, and I mean, honestly, I think again, it's all like Doyle said. It all depends on what do you think a steal is. Could it be that you got a star-studded DT in the supplemental draft, like what they were talking about before? Just different things like that. Like, it could be a steal for anybody, but for me personally, seeing how all these players play together, how they interacted in and outside the locker room, I felt like we had a lot of steals at the end of the
Yeah, I agree with a lot of you. I think there were just a lot of steals. I'm just, people see things differently. Fox, if you're still with us, I want to ask you, who did you think the steal of the draft was, and you can't say yourself?
No, I wouldn't say myself.
I know you
Okay, I know I'm a little biased, but I'm going to say Billy Ray Valentine.
Okay, why?
Okay, because in at least some mock drafts somewhere or another down the line, he was projected to go as high as second.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always projected to go within the top 10. He fell to 18, and I think that Atlanta did a pretty good job of picking him up.
Yeah.
He's going to be good for their locker room and stuff, and they've got a really good defensive end to go with, Josh.
Awesome. Okay, good take. All right, Gunny, the last word is to you tonight. Your steal of the draft.
Well, I'm going to go at pick number 133, and that'd be Digger Graves.
And why do you think Digger Graves was the steal of the draft?
How can you not like a Marine and that name that he has right there? Playing defensive end.
Enough said, Gunny. Great point. Good job. All right. We went a little over an hour, so my apologies, especially since we started so late. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in and sticking with us. Thank you to the entire panel, Chad, Doyle, Jeff, Nelson, Robert, Tanner, Fox, and Gunny. Also, I wanted to throw a few things out to you guys real quick. This Thursday, you might want to tune in because do you guys remember the mock panel draft that we had? Whenever it was, a couple weeks ago. Well, those same guys have come together to put together an organization called Scouts Inc. And this Thursday, they're going to be giving you guys your draft grades. So tune in for that. That's going to be a great show. That's going to be this Thursday, 9 p.m., hopefully, depending on scrimmages, right here on Twitch again. A couple more things I just want to throw at you. It sounds like I got a couple more followers, so if you haven't followed the show, please follow the show if you can. If I can get to 100, it really helps me get some extra things from Twitch to make the show better for you guys. Thank you again to the panelists. Thank you all the listeners. Of course, I need to thank Armadillo Ale Works, Trick Apparel, and Bad Boy Custom Rods for helping me out with my show. Thank you to Fonzie for producing the show. And I will let you know, like I always do, to have a glorious evening. And I will see you at the tees.